And greetings, viewers. Welcome to the Daily Space Weather. We've got more coronal mass ejections kicking off, a volcanic uptick, coronal holes, and instructions on resisting injustice. Have you noticed some? First thing we're going to do is look at the sun. It's a colorized magnetogram view. You can see sunspot 2783 in the lower left of your screen. Moving into a more Earth-facing zone here. And we're going to look at a lot more solar stuff, but first, I would remind our viewers, especially those in the U.S., that when injustice becomes law, resistance becomes duty. Let me repeat that. When injustice becomes law, resistance becomes duty. It's your duty to resist injustice. Again, especially if you're an American. As pandemics and other things like war don't prevent the Constitution from being the law of the land. So we've got some great helioviewer movies for you. Let's get to them. But first, the 10.7 centimeter radial flux. A proxy for sunspot number, as it is quite directly proportional, is at 77 solar flux units. Here is the 1-year chart of that. Thank goodness for solar minimum being over. Welcome to cycle 25, and indeed the neo-renaissance. Here are some helioviewer movies, and you're going to see a coronal mass ejection coming out of screen right, and we would anticipate that to miss the Earth by quite a bit to the west. Now, for you new viewers out there, you may not be aware that the Discover spacecraft on which the coronagraph that we're seeing there is located at Lagrange point 1. Let's move out to Lagrange point 5, where stereo A is located, and show you the view from there. And you can see Mercury in that imagery, as well as that coronal mass ejection. Again, we don't expect any of the ejections that occurred yesterday or today to be particularly Earth-facing. Let's get to some more views. And for that, we'll head back to Lagrange point 1. And here is 171 angstroms from the SDO, the Solar Dynamics Observatory. And we've got some other great movies here. Allow me to exit the screen. We've also got the 304 angstroms in today's Daily Space Weather Custom Helioviewer Movies section. Next, we've got some close-ups. Here's the North Polar region in 171 angstroms. Some filamentary activity there in the northeast, in the upper left portion of your screen. Here's the South Solar Polar region in 304 angstroms. And a good view of sunspot 2783. And here's a close-up of sunspot 2783 in 171 angstroms. Still an alpha-class sunspot, and it has remained quite stable here over the past 3 days, approximately. And the likelihood of major solar flares has actually gone down due to the Earth-facing quiet effect. Great view of that. I'll let it play through a third time here. And today's Smash Lights segment will be separate. If you haven't checked those out, head to youtube.com/smashomash/playlists. You'll see a whole playlist of Smash Lights segments. If you are into stuff besides the Daily Space Weather, that's where most of our additional content's located. There are other playlists as well. Feel free to check those out. And also, we would invite all of our viewers to head to smashamash.com. You can find links to our social media accounts up here in the upper right. Check those out. Visit us on our social media accounts. There is exclusive content on all of them. We've also got 2 Teespring stores there and a forum. You can go directly to the forum at smashamash.com/forum or click the link here. And we've also been putting YouTube videos directly on the homepage here, including smashamash.org presents The Sun, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and the latest, number 6, which we just put up yesterday. Here's a tidbit. Here is a highlight from smashamash.org presents The Sun 6. That's about enough. Again, smashamash.com has the links to all of that. You can watch them directly on the webpage if you like. Next, I'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons, the true source of funding for the content. Thanks, patrons. And for you non-patrons, please consider helping to fund the operation, as we're paid almost nothing to create the content on YouTube, something like about 2 cents per hour. So please consider becoming a patron, and we would recommend that you join at the $3 per month tier or higher, as we'll be changing our tiers around by New Year. Patreon.com/smashamash. There will be additional benefits to being a patron coming out as time goes on, so look for that. And we do create public posts, so even if you're unwilling to open your cobweb-encrusted wallet and send us a couple bucks per month for the content, you will still get free perks to convince your friends, foes, science noobs, and science pros to help support the channel as well. Thanks again, patrons. Next, we'll have a look at the real-time solar wind here. And we saw some pretty wild swings happening in the BTBZ. And the BTBZ is a reference to the total field strength, which is the BT, the black line. And the BZ is a reference to the orientation of the field, whether it's north or south pole. Negative being north pole, positive being south pole. We got to quite elevated levels here. We saw the BT all the way up to 9. And we saw the BZ all the way at -7. So a significant south pole oriented magnetic spike happening there right in the middle of the past 24 hours. Also accompanied by a shifting phi angle here, which is the angle of the incoming protons, which are the primary component of the solar wind. So we are in a coronal hole wind stream, and as it struck, we got all the way up to about 21 protons per cubic centimeter in terms of solar wind density. And we may have already reached the peak of the solar wind speed. It's a pretty weak coronal hole wind stream here, it looks like. So far reaching only to about 400 kilometers per second. And this is a telltale signature of a coronal hole wind stream for you new viewers out there. You'll see an increase in the solar wind density. And then when the solar wind density drops off, you see an increase in the solar wind speed, a typical coronal hole wind stream signature. And we would expect this to last probably another maybe 10 hours would be my guess, without getting super in-depth into it. Let's look at some more data. The KP index is at 2, and there is a forecast for geomagnetic unrest. We're expecting the KP index to go up to 4, according to NOAA and NASA. Let's take a look at geospace magnetosphere movies, and we have some oddities going on here in the shape. This pointed region here is not normal. And if you're wondering what you're looking at, here you're looking, on the left pane, you're looking at the equatorial view, which means you're looking essentially down at the pole. And on the other side, you're looking at the meridional view, you're looking at the side of the planet. Anyway, that's 4 hours of data, a little bit anomalous looking there. Next, looking at ground magnetic perturbations. And we see some anomalies here as well. We see lots of magnetic perturbations coming out of the... Scratch that, we see a bunch of missing data. So check it out, the clock is not advancing here. Let's try to refresh. And we have pressed refresh here, and it's not coming through. Some missing data there from University of Michigan. Looking at the proton flux to see, we don't see any big spikes of proton flux. This is what you would see when you get a major coronal mass ejection strike. Nothing happening there, it's flatlined. We saw a small B-class flare kick off here. Nothing to write home about. Again, the likelihood of major solar flares actually drops as the sunspot faces the Earth. Here's what's going on above my head, and I'm located in Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, if you're wondering. I like to use in-the-sky. If you're up before dawn, you may see Venus and Mercury rising ahead of the Sun. Here's where planets are in the solar system and so on. There's where we expect them to be in a week. Next, the GOES magnetometer is showing us these continued spiky behaviors here. You see this flattening out here and these extreme sawtooth maneuvers here. And I forecasted it. What can I say? I'm able to forecast the GOES magnetometer data, and sorry, can't tell you how. Next, we'll look at the Gong 2 data, and this is part of the National Sunspot Observatory. This is from 51 ground-based magnetometers, as well as magnetometers on stereo A and stereo B, located at Lagrange point 5 and Lagrange point 4. And we may see continued coronal mass ejections here, as we still see significant structures suspended. We are solidly in the North Pole current sheet shown here in green. Let's look at the coronal hole line of sight plot, which also shows you the B field, which is the magnetic field in which you live. And you can see the North Pole coronal hole system quite large and quite in charge right now of the current sheet on which you are in. The current sheet in which you are located. And here's the line of sight field plot, which also shows you the sun's Z fields in these areas. Those are the sun's polar fields. And we see some changes happening in the B field here, shown in blue. And let's look at the coronal potential field surface source plot. And there's that. Let's look at some more data, such as the electron flux, which is quite important in terms of things like satellite charging hazards. And we do see a little bit here over the Central Pacific. Here's a one-year chart of the electron flux. Here's the forecast, and we're expecting fairly flatlined electron flux levels here over the next 3 days. My forecast is for a little bit higher levels than what is forecasted once that coronal hole wind stream ends. Here's a 3-day chart of the electron flux, and here's a visualization of the total air column. So this is all the way from the thermosphere down to your GPS handset, for example. And once again, we see anomalies here. We see significant electron flux levels, especially around the equator and over North America. We'll let this play through a second time as it has refreshed. Next, we're going to look at just one slice of the atmosphere, just the ionosphere layer. We do it daily to help immerse our viewers in the data. Because if you really want to understand the relationship between all of these different variables, you need to look at it and attempt to understand the physics. And that's part of the purpose for the channel and daily space weather videos. This is the stuff that I would look at every day. I've decided to share it on YouTube, and we would encourage our viewers to endeavor to understand the physics as well. And thanks everybody for attempting to do so. Here's the current image, and the ionosphere is looking pretty normal there at 11:45 Universal Time. We did see an uptick in volcanoes as we cited in the title. Kluchevskoye is still erupting, producing a 17,000-foot ash plume. Suwanosejima exploded. Not sure the volcanic ash plume altitude there. Cinnabung has recently returned to the list. There's been a collapse of the lava dome. And we're seeing block and ash flows coming out of that interesting caldera there in Indonesia. It's about a 5,000-foot ash plume. Actually, sporadic explosions generated a around a 12,000 foot ash plume. Coronal exploding as well, flight level 070, 7,000 feet there. White Island is producing some continuous incandescent emissions that can be seen on satellite views, as well as exploding and producing a 2,500 foot high ash plume. Sangay exploding, flight level 200, 20,000 feet there. Revenador exploding, flight level 140, 14,000 foot ash plume there. And check it out, Sabancaya has a newly named lava dome known as Iske, which means two. It's approximately 12,000 meters squared in area. Please don't build a campsite on the lower slopes of Sabancaya. It could create an unhealthy environment for you. And we don't want to see you in an unhealthy environment because we greatly enjoy our viewers' comments and antics on social media, etc. Next, we'll have a look at earthquakes of the past 24, and we see a continued earthquake lull. I would remind people that live in these zones to please have an earthquake plan. Attempt to be an asset as opposed to a liability in the event of a major earthquake. The drought of 7, 8, and 9 magnitude earthquakes continues, folks. So earthquake droughts typically end in earthquakes, last I checked. And we've got a coronal hole wind stream striking right now, which means an increase in the proton flux. So even though it's not showing up as a major high energy proton event, a coronal hole wind stream is an increase in protons. Let's look at the last 24 hours of volcanic activity. Major deep quake in the south of the Fiji Islands there. It's at over 540 kilometers depth and a 4.9 magnitude. Also a deep quake strikes Bolivia, a 4.4 magnitude at 195 kilometers. Another deep quake strikes Japan, a 4.2 at 205 kilometers. Another deep quake strikes Peru. Another deep quake strikes Colombia. So a series of deep quakes have kicked off, as well as this 4.4 in Chile. Again, attempt to be an asset, not a liability, in the event of a disaster. If you're wondering when the cavalry, let's try again. If you're wondering when the cavalry will arrive, it could be because you're the cavalry. Here are the jet streams of the Western world. Here are the jet streams of the Eastern world, and the reason we show these daily is because these give you perhaps the most accurate snapshot at a quick glance over what your weather might be like than anything else. It'll give you insight into whether the sky will be clear or cloudy, as well as whether it'll be colder or warmer than the previous day based on the direction of these flows, north or south. And that's why we show it. Next, looking at pressure cells here on windy.com, and the U.S. is dominated by high pressure. We'll advance this via the GFS forecast to tomorrow. At about noon, there's where things are expected to be via the GFS forecast tomorrow around noon my time. Again, we're located in Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania. Thanks to SMASH staff for all your hard work and sharing all the content on social media, etc., as well as breaking new ground. Next, have a lightning at lookmaps.org. Have a look at lightningmaps.org, rather. And we've got a concentrated storm here over the eastern Mediterranean. Check it out. Major lightning out there. And leave us a comment if you're viewing from the Middle East. Let's take a look at the GOES lightning mapper. Here's what's going on. We still see lightning over the Caribbean as it's gone on and on and on. Next, looking at the U.S. Doppler Radar Map. Here is the U.S. Doppler Radar Map, courtesy Weather Underground. And some scattered showers over Florida and some rain over northern Pennsylvania. Otherwise, for the most part, just some showers, except for over northwestern Washington. Here's the cloud layer. I would note a lot of Low clouds here over the Atlantic and Gulf of Mexico once again. And here's a water vapor map. Blow that up to full size. And last but not least, I'd like to thank our viewers for tuning into the Daily Space Weather. Please keep your head and arms inside the smash plane at all times. We've got bonus features, including a 3-day video of the sun in 304 angstroms, a colorized magnetogram, and the intensitygram to show you the latest on sunspot 2783's umbra. Colorized magnetogram first. And there is that. Again, looks like only one sunspot here at 2783. Fairly stable here over the past 3 days or so. Alpha class, apparently. And again, we don't really see any other umbrae there. It's looking quite similar to how it did yesterday. And here's a 3-day SDO video. We pulled up the 3-day video here because there is so much activity, and it's quite visible in 304 angstroms. So that's how we're going to close things out today. Let's speed that up. There we go. So you can see a whole lot of filamentary activity happening. Again, check out our website, smAsho if you haven't done so. Thanks again to our patrons. Please share our content on your social media if you enjoy it. Press like and subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're watching it. This one will appear on YouTube and BitChute. Thanks to all of our subscribers in all those locations and those who interact with us on social media. We'll see you next time here at the Daily Space Weather. I've been Dan, aka smAsho, and we would remind you one more time that it is your duty to resist unjust laws. Best wishes, and may that solar wind be at your back.